Hello and welcome to the Kubernetes podcast from Google. I'm your host, Caslin Fields.
And I am Abdel Sigiwa.
This week, we talk with Charity Majors. Charity is the co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb.io. She pioneered the concept of modern observability. We dive into observability, engineering management, and blogging. But first, let's get to the news.
Vitess is a CNCF graduated project for deploying, scaling, and managing large clusters of database instances. On June 27th, the community announced the release of Vitess 20, along with version 2.13 of the Vitess Kubernetes operator. Version 20 focuses on usability and maturity of existing features and continues to build on the solid foundation of scalability and performance established in previous versions.
On June 20th, Anthropic released Claude 3.5 Sonnet, their first release in the Claude 3.5 model family. The model costs $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens, with a 200,000 token context window.
The call for proposals for KubeCon and Cloud Native Con India is now open until August 25th. This is the first time KubeCon is coming to India. The event will be held in Delhi on December 11 and 12. If you are interested in speaking, make sure you get those submissions in.
Azure announced support of the Open Container Initiative, or OCI, version 1.1.0 specification in Azure Container Registry. This enables ACR users to establish relationships between container images and artifacts, package, store, and distribute generic non-container artifacts such as OCI artifacts in ACR, and to discover and query artifact relationships.
VMware Tanzu announced version 2.7 Greenplum. This release, announced on June 26th, is designed to elevate data analytics and AI-driven initiatives. 2.7 introduced a variety of performance enhancements, optimization capabilities, ecosystem extensions, and more. The Tanzu team also announced a public beta for GenAI on Tanzu platform for Cloud Foundry.
On June 20th, Adobe published an end-user journey report showcasing their contributions to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF, ecosystem. The report highlights their involvement in over 46 projects since 2015 and how this work has strengthened their engineering teams. And that's the news. I am honored and absolutely delighted today to be speaking with Charity Majors. Charity is the co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb.io. She pioneered the concept of modern observability, drawing on her years of experience building and managing massive distributed systems at Parse, which was acquired by Facebook, then subsequently at Facebook and at Linden Lab building Second Life. She is the co-author of Observability Engineering and Database Reliability Engineering by O'Reilly, and she loves free speech, free software, and single malt scotch. Welcome to the show, Charity.
Thank you for having me. That was a mouthful. Yes. I don't know that I've ever heard it read out loud. I'm like, oof, wow, it should probably be shorter.
Right? That's an adventure with bios. It's not like I have to read the whole bio, but I kind of want to because it's kind of awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So I am so excited to have you on the show today. I've been a big fan for a while, following you on social media. And something that I particularly love that you do are your blog posts. And a lot of your blogs focus on topics of both observability, which obviously you do a lot in that space.
Do a lot, yeah.
And also engineering management. So today I want to talk about both of those a bit. And I think we'll start with engineering management.
Cool.
So I know a lot of folks out there are probably like, I don't want to become a manager. I don't care about engineering management advice. But my philosophy on management-related content has always been whether I go a management path or not, I'm always going to have a manager. So I hope everyone out there can find some benefit in learning a little bit about engineering management from you today, because I certainly do every time I read your stuff.
I feel like management has this, it comes with this baggage. Like, we have all these associations with management that come with like hierarchy and being told what to do and being managed. Like, it's kind of a big word, right? And a lot of our sort of assumptions come like from the industrial days where, it was like, the 8-hour workday comes in, the industrial time. And a lot of these, concepts just map kind of weirdly onto modern stuff. I think that everyone should care about management because if you care about engineering, you care about doing it well, right? And I think management is not the same as leadership, because leadership is something that, as you become more senior in your career, everyone needs to be a leader, right? And it's so tied up with who you are as a person, right? Like the kind of leader you become is so entwined with who do you want to be when you grow up. And I feel like approaching this from a more holistic sense of how do we do this really well? And then what are the roles that need to happen? I think a lot of people never saw them being themselves as managers, but then, they care about these things. And then a moment comes up when, oops, they're the best person for the job, or oops, they're the only person for the job, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to do it. As someone with a pretty anarchic streak, I've never had any respect for my managers. I feel like anyone above me in the org chart is just somebody I get to beat up on, right? But it's taken me a while to come around to an idea of this where it's it's not about authority. It's not being told what to do. It's about how do systems work? And if you look at systems theory, hierarchy emerges in nature everywhere where you have self-organizing systems. And in a hierarchy, you look down for function and up for meaning. And it's the only way that you can scale an organization. Cause you can't have everyone talking to everyone. It just doesn't work. Right. And when you think of modularizing your code, right, you think about how much more efficient it is and how high bandwidth your connection is to other stuff inside the modules, right? While you have this abstraction. And I think that fits really well when you're talking about how teams function, right? You have a team with a mission and a charter, and your manager is the nervous system that connects you to other teams and charters. So I feel with a creative profession like engineering, it's actually really unhealthy to put a lot of hierarchy and authority onto this role when it's not one. You could kind of envision the org chart as flipped over. It's more if you're a manager, it's your job to support, I've just been talking. I can keep talking about this without stopping, so I'll pause for breath. TLDR, you're right. Everyone should care about management, whether or not they are one or plan on being one.
Exactly. I feel strongly about this as well, so we can really go in on this. But one thing that you said there that I really want to call out as an easy tidbit for folks to take away today, you look down for function and you look up for meaning. I think that'll resonate with a lot of people.
Isn't that marvelous? I came to this topic when a friend of mine had this terrible experience as an engineering leader. He was hired as a VP to join this company and had 30 engineers under him and no managers. And his boss was well, why? We don't need managers. We're a startup. Everyone can report to you. Nobody needs, and he was just oh, and it was this existential crisis. How do you it's about something that's so fundamental. And that's why I wrote that blog post about, why do people need managers? And there's a really complicated answer that goes into systems theory and all this stuff. And then there's a really simple answer, which is that everybody uses engineering managers. It's a pattern that we figured out that works. You can hire people who know what to do with managers. You can read books and training. Why would you reinvent something this profound and complicated if you don't have to? If it's not your core function as a company, you should use boring technology and boring social systems.
I think the concept of looking up for meaning also says a lot about how individual contributors can work with their managers. I think what you're saying there too is managers they should be kind of a support system for the engineers who are doing a lot of the functional work. And so a lot of the job of management should be making sure that the engineers have the right opportunities to grow, and also connecting that to the business, that you're working on the right things that are going to help the business grow. So I think there's a lot in that, both for managers, but also for individual reports, and how do you kind of manage up?
Yeah. When I was young, it wasn't cool to care about the business. We were all oh, we care about just the technology. But what is it that, Daniel Pink said that what we all want out of our work is autonomy, mastery, and meaning. And what does your work mean if people don't use it, right? What does your work mean if it's not helping the company grow? And I feel this is something that we're growing up as an industry and realizing that, oh, it's really cool to care about the business.
Yeah. And I think that touches on a topic that I totally did not expect to go into today. But I think finding meaning in your work in some way, shape, or form, hopefully your managers can help you do that. But if you're not doing that, I think that just leads directly to burnout. So it's very important.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God. The times in my life that I have gotten close to burnout have not been the times when I was working hardest. They have been some of the times when I was working least. But like,
yes.
What unified those experiences was that I didn't feel like what I was working on really made a difference. Or it shouldn't need to be done, right? Or something like, or like people were like, oh, you're amazing. And I'm like, I'm working an hour a day. This is not okay. You know, those are the times when I was like, is this industry for me? I mean, the thing about working intensely is that some of the best times in my life at work have been some of the hardest times where I've worked the most. But it's because I was so invested in what was going on. And I feel like the thing about burnout, and this kind of goes back to hierarchy and authority, is if the motivation is coming from someone else telling you what you have to do, it's burnout city.
Yep.
Right? But if it's coming from you and you're like, I'm invested, this is part of me, I care about this, then it's such a good sign, right? Yes, you need to pace yourself. Yes, you need to take breaks, but like you're on fire, you know?
And that is such a core concept that impacts everyone in engineering positions today. So maybe that is a good place to ask for advice on. If there are folks out there in the audience today who are engineering managers or ICs, what advice do you have for perhaps engineering managers and helping folks find a way to feel some ownership or feel kind of more invested in their work?
You know, it's hard to give this advice kind of unilaterally because it changes so much. Like, you know, the first 5 to 7 years of your career, you're just going to be doing what other people tell you a lot, and that's okay. They have your best interest at heart. It takes that long to forge a grown-up software engineer. You know, we're an apprenticeship industry. But after that, like, yeah, you need to care about what you're doing. I guess the biggest piece of advice that I would give all technical people is the role of management is changing really fast. And like the field of engineering is changing really fast. And I think that it's not a good thing to get too attached to your identity as a manager or an engineer. Because I think the strongest engineering managers are never more than 4 or 5 years away from writing code themselves. They need to go back to the well and freshen up those skills. And I think the strongest super senior ICs that I've met have all been ones who spent time in management, right? Because so many of these skills are socio-technical, like they're grounded in technology, but they build on top of that with, you know, people and human and organization and business skills. Thinking of yourself as a technologist is, I think, the key to a really long and fulfilling career. I see too many managers who like, especially when you're young, you get promoted, quote unquote, to manager. And it's so flattering because you spent your whole life like looking up to these people and feeling like you're being told what to do. And finally, it's your turn to tell people what to do. And then it doesn't actually work that way. but they become managers really early and they get really attached to that. And the industry changes, right? It's really hard to have a 10, 20-year career as an engineering manager without becoming one of those people who's just so detached from what's going on that you can't do your best for people and that they don't respect you as much as they would, you know, someone who really lives and breathes and walks their problems. So yeah, that's my best advice. Think of yourself as a technologist. Think of your career as a long one. The best opportunities in tech have always come opportunistically for me. They're rarely the ones where I'm like, I want to be that in 10 years. It's like,
yeah.
you try to preserve optionality, right? And you try and put yourself in interesting places with interesting people, and who knows what's going to happen.
I love that. And maybe that's a good transition then into talking about observability. So you've been involved in the whole concept of observability as it's kind of evolved in the modern era. I bet that was one of those opportunistic moments for you, wasn't it?
I did, you know, and I was laughing because I kind of specialize in rage-driven development. I mean, I hate databases, and I've always ended up being the one running the databases. I hate monitoring. I hate graphs. I hate all this stuff. And somehow these are the 2 books I've ended up writing as databases and observability. But like, hate is just another form of passion, right? It's like apathy is, I guess, the opposite of love or hate. Love and hate are very tightly entwined. But yeah, observability wasn't really on the scene when Christine and I started Honeycomb in 2016. And in fact, you know, we borrowed the term from control systems theory, where the definition of observability is how can you understand the inner workings of a system just by observing its outputs. You know, and we read them, we were like, oh, classic light bulb moment, just like, oh my God, this is what we're trying to do. And it's been interesting. For the first few years, we were like, okay, here's observability. And you have to have high cardinality and high dimensionality and explorability and wide events and all this stuff. And then around 2019, 2020, it started getting some attention. Then all of a sudden, everybody in the world is like, we do observability too. And so now all of your monitoring and logging and tracing and APM and RUM, everybody's like, we do observability, which kind of threw us for a loop. These days, I guess, I like to think of observability as a property of complex systems, just like maintainability, reliability, performance, which puts the emphasis on the system rather than the tools. And I really like that. But it kind of begs a big question, which is that there's a really big step function in difference, power, ease of use, cost, everything between what I think of as the observability 1.0 world and the 2.0 world. And 1.0 world is one where you've got 3 pillars, right? You've got metrics, logs, and traces. And you're probably paying to store your data in a RUM tool and a profiling tool and a logging tool and a metrics tool and a dashboarding tool and and all these different tools. And you, the engineer, sits in the middle. And what are you doing? Well, you're eyeballing shapes on graphs and going, that's probably the same as that. Or you're copy pasting IDs around. You're like, well, this log line, I hope I captured this trace. And you paste it in and it's expensive. It's unwieldy. People can get really good at it. But I feel like this model's kind of come to the end of its natural life cycle. Observability 2.0 tools are ones where you have a single source of truth. Arbitrarily wide structured data blobs with no indexing, no schemas, no having to predefine metrics. It's just anything, any data type you might want, you just throw it in. And you emit these wide structured log events, either one per request per service or one per span. And then you put them in a backend that lets you explore. So it's a lot more like a business intelligence tool where you can slice and dice and you can zoom in and you can zoom out and because data is made valuable by context, right? And the problem with the 1.0 world is that all your context is scattered around and you can't connect one piece to another. And in the 2.0 world, it's all connected. So it's just a data type, right? You don't have to worry about, oh, is this tag too much cardinality? Oh, is this number a counter? You just throw it in and then you just use it just as a data struct. And it's so simple. What are we supposed to do for breaking changes? Like the semantic versioning says you should only do a breaking change when it's a backwards incompatible, breaking change. And I think the one source of truth versus many sources of truth is definitely a breaking change. But it means that your cost doesn't go up, 7x your request traffic. It means your cost goes up as you get more value out of your tool. That's one of the biggest problems today is as costs go up, the value that people are getting out of the tools is going down.
Yeah.
So it's changed a lot, but I think we're starting to see a movement picking up steam where it's okay, the metric has been the source of truth that we've been building tools on for 40 years now. It was built for a world when hardware was incredibly expensive and there wasn't a lot of data. And the metric is a powerful tool for summarizing vast quantities of data. It doesn't help you explore your systems. It doesn't help you understand your systems or your code at all.
I love the idea of having the system kind of define what observability means. I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but I'm actually thinking of this in terms of systems that are not technology systems. The first things that came to mind actually for me were banking. Honestly, trying to understand the different accounts that I have and how much is in these accounts and how are they invested and all of those kinds of things. Yeah. That is something that I really want observability on. I'm actually working on a project right now to create an app I hadn't thought about it this way, but to implement observability in my closet because I have too many clothes and I don't know what clothes I have. And in both of these real world cases, what I'm trying to do is answer questions about a system. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're trying to do here too, in the technology observability sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many socio-technical, sort of ripple effects and ramifications that come from this one small thing. Is it one source of truth or many? But one of my favorites is that historically, in an Observability 1.0 world, the debuggers of last resort, the people who understand the system best, are always the people who have been there the longest. They've been through the most outages. They remember writing the most code, and it's kind of depressing, I think, to join a team and know that you can never catch up with the people who know it best. And that's just not true in an Observability 2.0 world. In an Observability 2.0 world, you don't have to make all these intuitive leaps and guesses and memories of past outages. The data is in the tool. The context is there. You can ask the questions you want to know. And so the best debuggers are the people who are the most curious. The people who look at their changes every day, the people who are used to using the tools and used to kind of like just taking a couple of minutes at the end of their lunch break and teasing apart what's going on. Like, honestly, so like I am not an early adopter. When I was at Facebook, I was firmly in the grumpy old man lane, because I knew how to use Arnagios and Ganglia tools. Like I was a whiz at them. And it wasn't until a couple of our engineers started feeding some data sets into a tool they're called Scuba. And the whippersnappers started debugging problems faster than I could. I didn't think that was possible. I'm like, how are you doing this? I was like professionally humiliated, But like, it's really exciting. It's really exciting when people who are new to the code base can pick it up and see things and understand things that even the people who have been working on it for 10 years couldn't see or understand using the old tools.
I don't know how you phrased it earlier, but you had a short little tidbit about context really being kind of the value in observability.
Data is made valuable by context, right? Data on an island is not valuable. The more connected it is to other things, the more valuable it is.
That I feel like is really at the core of all of this. So like, it's not just about having all of the data, like you were saying. The problem with traditional observability tools is that you have all the data and the data just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but you can't understand it because you don't have the context. So what you're aiming for
exactly
is a way to have all of the data with its context so that you can answer questions more easily and develop that understanding even if you don't have it innately.
Most of our tools are built in the metric, and the metric is literally a number. All of its context was stripped away at right time. You can never get it back, right? That's why you're over here eyeballing this shape on this dashboard and that shape on that dashboard going, they're probably the same ones. Nothing connects them. You have no way of answering that. You threw away that data when you gathered it. You're like, this metric was over here. That metric was over there. Never the twain shall meet. You can only guess. And it's just wild to me that it's 2024 and we're still like storing all this incredibly expensive data that doesn't have any context.
Yes. I actually was just having a conversation with some engineers who work on Kubernetes, open source mainly, about how do you do that with like Kubernetes logs are at so many different levels because you've got the application, you've got the container, you've got the system of Kubernetes itself. And so you have all of this complexity and you have logs at the different levels. And if you have something that goes wrong and you get the error at the top level, it often doesn't tell you anything. And you have to dive down into the deeper levels to find it. So having that connection of like, this is where that came from and having more context is kind of how you can actually debug things.
Exactly.
Cool. So this is what you're aiming for with Honeycomb. Can you tell me a little bit about how Honeycomb addresses this challenge?
Yeah. Honeycomb, it was built to spec for what we call Observability 2.0. We're big fans of open telemetry, but honestly, we're agnostic about how the data gets bundled and shows up. When it shows it up in our APIs, we accept structured data. And we recommend that tracing has gotten a bad rap because the first few generations of tracing tools were so hostile to users. Let's put it that way. Like every place I know of that rolled out a tracing tool 2 or 3 years later, you don't have a team where every engineer uses the tracing tool. You have a tool where the people who set up the tracing tool use the tracing tool. And the engineers who do traces go to those people and ask them for help when they need a trace. Like, they're just absurdly, walled off and difficult. But Honeycomb accepts arbitrarily wide structured data blobs, and we store the raw events. In a 1.0 world, you did your aggregation at right time. You made your decisions about which questions you were going to be able to ask when you wrote the data out, and you can't really ask new ones. With Honeycomb, we store these raw wide events, and then we do the aggregation at read time, so you can ask anything. You can be like, and not only that, but you can ask the machine to do it for you. So one of my favorite things is called Bubble Up, which is just this thing, because we've stored all these raw events, any graph, any dashboard, any SLO that you have, if you see something, you're like, I wonder what that is. You draw a little bubble around it, and we compute for all the dimensions inside the bubble versus the baseline outside the bubble and sort and diff them. So you're like, what's this spike? And then immediately you can see, inside the spike there are only events going from Android devices using this version from using this language pack, using this build ID, using this application ID, using these feature flags, because like so much of debugging is, here's the thing I care about. Why? Why do I care about it? What's different about the same? And this is where I feel like the ways we've debugged in the past have relied on you knowing what the answer is before you can ask the question. It's very search first, right? You have to know what string to search for, what metrics to look for. You have to know what you're looking for before you can find it, which is just so ass backwards. But anyone can go, I care about that. Yeah. Why? And when it comes to debugging, the debugging workflow should usually be either, here's my SLO, it's burning down faster than it should, so tell me what's different about these events that are violating my SLO versus the baseline. Oh, now I immediately know what to go fix. That's like scenario 1. And scenario 2 is, another thing about 1.0 versus 2.0 is that Observability 1.0 is very much about debugging, fixing problems, operating your code. And 2.0 is like the substrate of observability-driven development. It's what your development is based on. It's what allows you to form these really tight feedback loops where you're instrumenting your code as you go and you deploy it and it's there and you're like, okay, looking at the lens of the instrumentation I just wrote, what's different? Is it doing what I expected it to do? Does anything else look weird? You don't know if anything's wrong or not. But that point right there is your best chance to ever find a problem.
And that's kind of what you did in the Google Cloud Next keynote.
Yes.
You gave an example of this. And I think also on social media, I've seen you post a few times, usually a retweet of someone who's like, hey, this happened. And it was observability driven development. Those are very interesting situations.
Yeah, because the cost of finding and fixing bugs goes up exponentially from the moment that they're written, right? If you don't find it shortly after you've deployed it, it's probably not going to be you who finds the problem. It's going to be a user or a customer or another engineer at some point down the line, months, years, never. And so finding that feedback loop and making it fast. And it's what makes engineering fun, is having this sort of constant conversation with your code, just being able to move fast with so much confidence. The whole debate about should we deploy on Fridays or not, that speaks of so much fear to me. Just this fear of so often we deploy things and we have no idea if they work or not. We don't know what's going to page us. We're not confident that this worked. And of course they aren't confident because all they have are aggregates and random exemplars. They can't actually see what they deployed and how it's different from before they deployed. Of course they're not confident. So I think it's really just it's a sea change in how we think about building and shipping our code.
So it feels like this Observability 2.0 concept is really about being an engineer who is just fascinated with your code and you're excited to learn about how it works when it's out there in the field. And if you have the ability, the tooling where you can do something and then just go and ask questions about it, I feel like everyone's asking those questions, but you usually can't see the answers.
Exactly. Not only that, but you're used to getting punished for your curiosity. I remember when we put a new engineer on call and they start out curious as they're like, what is this? What is this? And you're just like, oh, grasshopper, don't pick up that rock. It's going to take you on a long and winding road. It's going to be 5 days later. You're not going to have gotten anything done. Just don't even look at it, Well, that sucks.
And you're going to end up in all of these weird places and it's just going to be pain and suffering.
Because it's so true that right now, everyone's distributed systems are broken in so many ways, so many ways. One of the most entertaining things is we'll often do these POCs with prospects, right? And without fail, we'll be pairing with them, writing instrumentation or something. And our sales engineers will start going, oh, what's that? Is something wrong over here? 5 minutes later, someone gets paged and they're like, how did you do that? Or sometimes they'll be we have to stop and fix all these things. And our sales engineers will just be like, oh, no, we're never going to get through the POC if we don't just get through this. They've been broken for a long time, trust me. It's just that you never had the ability to see it. And it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying, and it's so nice to feel confident about your work.
This is making me very curious about how databases factor into your book, and I need a book club to help me go read that book, because I actually have a meeting later today about databases. So I feel like this is going to come back into that.
So, I'll send you a couple links after this, because someone who worked for us briefly wrote 2 beautiful, my mom and dad would understand these pieces, I think, just essays about database internals and how they roll up to observability. And they're just such fun reads. You'll love them.
I'm very interested. So we'll make sure to include those in the show notes.
Yes.
I look forward to it. And so I think we should start wrapping things up. This is so fascinating. And I feel like it's just opening a door. Observability, I'm realizing, is what I want from so many of the systems in my life.
Yes.
And so I just want to go learn about observability, this 2.0 concept, because it's just about being fascinated and observing your systems, learning from your systems.
It's a reasonable request. Yeah. Everyone wants to understand their lives. Yes.
Very interesting. I'm excited to dive into that. But one last thing that I want to ask you about, since I am such a big fan of your blog, I have noticed that anytime I attend a Coffee Ops event, which for anyone listening who is not familiar with Coffee Ops, it's this meetup series. It's like a global concept where
it's super fun.
Yeah, folks get together and you sit in round tables usually, and you have Post-it notes, and everybody writes ideas of things they want to talk about on Post-it notes. And then everybody votes. You have a certain number of votes. And so you talk about the top topics and for 5 minutes, and then folks decide if they want to move on to the next topic or not. Anyway, every time I go to one of these, I bring up blogging and everybody wants to talk about it. So as someone whose blogging I really admire, do you have any advice for folks out there who want to write blogs?
Sure. I have a goal for myself of writing 1 post a month, and I've never actually achieved it.
Can relate.
But, goals are important. So one easy tip is, if you ever write a talk, write a blog post out of it too. The reach of blogs is actually farther than even the best talks. They're indexed, people, will link them. And if you've already done the work to pull together the material, it's so, and anytime you write a blog post that's good, honestly, you can convert it into a talk. It's just really easy. Number 2, I think people get kind of all up in their own heads about, is this original or not? Has anyone ever talked about this? Is anyone going to be interested in this? If you're interested in it, write about it, because it's the interest and the passion that comes across. Nobody really wants, nobody really cares, oh, has this been said before? The best messages are the ones that get said over and over and over, because they affect lots and lots of people. So it doesn't matter. By chiming in, you're saying, yes, this matters to me too. And that means you're contributing to the growth and the distribution of things that you care about. And don't feel like you have to be the voice of authority. You're the voice of the authority of your experience. And if you've had an experience that is sticking with you, it will probably resonate. It doesn't have to resonate with everyone. It can resonate with other people like you. Some of my favorite talks and writings are about subjects that I know very well. It's just really fun to see a new, fresh take. It's fun to see someone experience it for the first time. These are perennial topics. People are always learning these things. And so think less about what you should do and think about what does interest you and what does stick with you, and write about those things.
I think
also, shorter is better than longer. Advice that I never take.
I will admit that your posts are long, but every time, and I have a lot of trouble reading long blog posts, but I never have trouble reading yours because they are just so interesting. The passion really comes across. And I think that's a theme throughout our whole conversation today, is kind of that fascination and passion. Whether we're talking about engineering management, doing your job as an engineer, you need to have that passion and that enthusiasm for it. Observability is about feeding that passion and that fascination with the work that you're doing. And blogging is about sharing that fascination and passion with the world.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Caslin.
That's always my advice for folks who want to give talks or write blogs or anything, honestly. The best content that you create is going to be about something that you just really care about.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's been done a million times. If you care about it, then it'll be interesting.
Definitely. Agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Charity. As I said at the beginning, it really is an honor to talk to you because I just love your work. I love what you're doing. Can't wait to see more of it.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you for being on.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for that interview.
And welcome back, Abdel. You've been just all over the place lately.
Yes. So many things happening in Europe. It's crazy.
You even gave a keynote, right?
Yes, I did a keynote in front of 1,300 people. Oh, okay. Let's not hold our horses. I did 2 minutes in a 50 minutes keynote in front of 1,300 people, and it was mostly a demo.
Still counts. Still counts.
Still counts, yes. That was IO Connect in Berlin. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And then you've had a bunch of other events lately too, right? It's just the season.
Yeah, I did KCD Munich, where I am actually recording right now. I did a keynote in that one. Well, shared the keynote with one of the organizers called Max. And yeah, a bunch of events, a bunch of workshops. And this was supposed to be my last trip. I was supposed to be back home tomorrow and just relax for the summer. But no, I am going to Berlin because there is an event we're sponsoring in Berlin and they need somebody.
Nice.
And then I'll be home.
Well, I'm glad that we've been able to do all of the things that we need to do for the podcast while you've been busy traveling.
Yes. Just for the people who listen to this podcast, we do this on the road. Well, I do this on the road.
Yeah, he does this on the road. I don't do that.
Yeah. Kathleen talked to me. I'm in a different hotel, background, random place, Paris, whatever. So
yeah,
I'm always carrying my microphone with me.
Yeah, that's intense. I don't want to have to carry my microphone around. So.
I mean, honestly, it's very cool. A bunch of those events that I have done are KCD events, right? Like I've done 3 of them. I've done the Zurich one, I've done the Barcelona one, and I've done the one in Munich. And usually we meet people who listen to the podcast. Just literally today, I was talking to like 3-4 people who are like active listeners. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good interactions. So I'm glad that we get to do this because then you meet the community, right?
Yeah. I've been considering trying to run a Kubernetes community days in Seattle, but that's a lot of work. Running events is a lot of work. So we'll see if that ever happens.
It is a lot of work. Well, you do DevOps Days Seattle, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll do it next year. It was a heavy lift this year, so I might define the role and let someone else handle it for a year or two. We'll see.
It is a lot of work. And they posed actually KCDs for 2024, and they're not accepting any more in 2025 because they're changing the rules.
Oh, wow.
So they're like updating the rules. And I think in the upcoming rules, or it's already existing, if you want to organize a KCD, you have to have either one of the organizers has to be either an end member, so works for a company which is an end member, CNCF end member, or be a CNCF ambassador.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that change. And the reason that I wanted to talk about all of the events that you're doing, aside from the fact that they're awesome and you're awesome, is that you haven't been able to listen to the episode yet, right? So I'll have to tell you about it.
Yes, please. I will listen to it tomorrow probably on the way back to home. What did you talk with Charity about?
I was so excited to get to talk with Charity. I feel like maybe people will be a bit embarrassed by me being embarrassed by getting to talk to Charity.
Imposter syndrome?
Yeah, a little bit. She is amazing. So the first thing that really drove me toward Charity's content was her blogs about engineering management. My philosophy, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, is that regardless of what you want your career path to be, learning a little bit about management is probably always going to be beneficial because whether you go a management path yourself or not, you're always going to have a manager. And so we talked a good bit about how it's useful for anyone to learn a little bit about engineering management, and we covered a couple of different topics. I know one that I didn't expect for us to talk about actually was burnout, because we talked about how an engineering manager's job should be to, of course, support their team. And a large part of that is trying to help them find ways to do work that they care about. And if you're doing work that you don't care about, that you don't have any kind of passion in at all, it's a lot easier to burn out. And so engineering managers have a very important job to do in helping their team do work that they're interested in, grow in ways that they're interested in that also benefit the business, and kind of helping everyone avoid burnout while supporting the business.
Yeah. And I guess also, if, as to your point, even if you're just an individual contributor, understanding how management work would probably help you even have a conversation with your manager.
Exactly.
In the sense that you can know how to ask for the right support, know how to ask for the right things, kind of settle the expectations in the correct way, right?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it in the interview too, but one of my favorite zines by Julia Evans, love Julia Evans zines, is Help, I Have a Manager. And when I mentor students who are moving into the technology industry, upon graduation or nearing the completion of our mentorship period, I will try to get them a copy of that zine, because I think that's one of the hardest things when you come into a working environment, especially even if you've worked in other industries or something before. Having a tech engineering manager, I feel like, can be a little intimidating. And so
yeah.
I think it's really useful advice that both Charity and Julia Evans do.
Yeah. And I think we can also add to that Aja, your manager.
Yes,
she's also publishing quite a lot of writing about this topic, right?
Yeah, I'll grab some of those blog posts and put them in the show notes. She's done some really useful ones. And not just about engineering management either, kind of like engineering culture. There's one that I always think about by Aja that is talking about the different ways that people approach problems. Mm-hmm. And using a toaster as an example, like, do you want to know how the toaster works, or do you just want to toast?
That's a very good analogy.
Aja does some great content.
Yeah, she's awesome also.
And then we also talked about, of course, observability, because honeycomb.io is an observability tool based on Charity's experience as an engineer, which we talked a little bit about her experience, and about the concept of observability 2.0. And what I really got out of that was that observability 2.0 is about enabling you to answer the questions that you want to answer. So instead of being just a whole bunch of logs and metrics that are really hard to sort through and parse, and you can only answer the questions that those logs and things are designed to answer, collecting things, a lot of things, in such a way that they are very easy to use to answer those questions. And that's kind of the concept behind Honeycomb and the concept behind Observability 2.0 as a concept, which is something that I've heard around in observability spaces, of like, these observability tools are designed for the concepts of Observability 2.0. So
yeah, and also Honeycomb is one of the companies that have been around for a while. So they are really well established, mature, kind of known provider.
Yeah.
So I've heard about them. I think the first time I heard about them, I was in an SRE conference in Dublin like 10 years ago or something. Yeah, they've been around. I see observability as you remember we talk about this all the time. We say when we go to KubeCon, every KubeCon has like that one topic.
Yep.
That is like the thing. And of course, 2024 Paris was observability. That was like the major one.
Observability has been up there a couple of times for sure.
Yeah. I feel like now there is even more and more of it, even just like smaller events that I do. And there is also a lot of observability for AI and ML that started to bubble up as a topic, because that's like a different kind of workloads, and they probably require different types of how do you observe this thing and how do you look at it. So I think it's a pretty cool topic.
Yeah, what I've been hearing from observability folks mostly about AI workloads is that it's mostly like observing any other type of workloads, maybe with a little bit more focus on making sure that you're using your resources efficiently, because they're so resource intensive.
Well, yes and no, in the sense that, yes, it's a regular workload, so your typical metrics are relevant, but when you are talking about an LLM, input and output tokens are important, right? And when you load the model into a GPU, the performance of the GPU so is important. So there's like some extra bits and pieces. I don't know if you saw... And this is not about observability or what am I about to talk about, but there was actually a doc shared with the dev mailing list for Kubernetes, so dev@kubernetes.io, where they are it's a proposal, and it's a proposal for building a gateway for LLMs. It's literally called LLM gateways.
Interesting. No, I haven't read that yet.
And so it's part of the gateway API, but it will be just a specific gateway for LLMs, because LLMs have those different ways of managing traffic into an LLM. So it's not, it's HTTP traffic, but it's like, those input tokens are important. And they're designing something very, very specific for OpenLLMs. If you go to the dev@kubernetes.io mailing list, you will be able to find the doc there.
Interesting. Yeah. I had not thought about monitoring the input and output tokens of an LLM as part of observability. It's definitely part of quality control if you're using any kind of AI component or feature in your applications, because we all know how AIs are right now. you got to make sure that they're saying something at least around the right lines. It may look right, but
For sure.
Hallucinations and all of that. So quality control is very important. And so monitoring both what you're putting into the LLM and what you're getting out of it for quality, and then having tools to like rerun it or add additional context or things like that is definitely part of the app design, I think, that's going into AI apps or apps with AI features right now. But I hadn't thought about that as part of observability, but you could characterize it that way, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, just very simple example would be scaling. Like if you need to scale based on the tokens or based on how many users, because your input traffic into the LLM doesn't look like typical HTTP or gRPC traffic.
Interesting.
Yes, it's an HTTP call, but the amount of tokens in that HTTP call are important, and you might need to scale based on that. So it's just like there is a bunch of little bits and pieces that makes LLMs kind of special. They're not different. They're just special.
Interesting. We didn't really talk about that much in the episode. Now I kind of wish that I had asked Charity about that, but
or probably for the good, I think. But
probably
most
for the
listeners
best. Yes,
don't really want to do yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
There's plenty of more interesting topics about observability in general.
So actually, the funny thing, when I did IO Connect event, so there was, of course, quite a lot of AI ML. By far, the largest stage at the event was the AI one. And there was like one stage for cloud, one stage for web, and one stage for mobile, which were smaller. The next day, we had the GDE, the Google Developer Experts Forum. So there's like a summit for GDEs in Berlin. And I had a talk there about GKE. And I showed up and I was like, okay, we're going to talk about GKE. We're not going to talk about AI ML. And I could see the relief in people's eyes.
There's a lot of that, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
And then the last thing that I asked her about to close things up was advice for blogging.
Oh, cool. That would be nice.
And what I kind of liked about her response was that it wasn't like, oh, you have to do this and this in order to be successful at blogging. Like you have to make sure that you blog every week, or you have to follow these rules about the structure of your blog or anything like that. It was just like, write about things that you're passionate about, which is often my advice to folks who are submitting talks to conferences. Another piece of advice from her was, if you do a talk at a conference, just turn that into a blog post.
Yeah, repurpose.
And the best content is always content that you're excited about. So it can run long. A lot of her blog posts are really long, I must say, but they are fantastic. And so I read them in their entirety, even though I usually don't do that. So it's all about the passion. If you write about something that you're passionate about, the rest of the rules can be a little flexible.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, Abdel.
Thank you.
I hope you get a break soon.
I hope so, yet as well. And thank you for listening to us. Thank you for sticking until the end.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of another episode. If you enjoyed this show, please help us spread the word and tell a friend. If you have any feedback for us, you can find us on social media at KubernetesPod, or reach us by email at kubernetespodcast@google.com. You can also check out the website at kubernetespodcast.com, where you'll find transcripts, show notes, and links to subscribe. Please consider rating us in your podcast player so we can help more people find and enjoy the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.